So during this series, we are looking at some things from this book, Becoming a Future-Ready Church, which is about the shifts that churches need to make in order to remain relevant and important and needed as we move further into the 21st century. And if you're not following along, I should point out, I think there is still a copy in Fellowship Hall if you want one, and we can kind of share them around. You can also get it wherever fine books are sold. And this week we are talking about this move from church refugees, from people who have kind of gotten away from their own congregations, to the church as a refuge for people. But refuge here is meant in a very specific way. And the authors of the book in this chapter are talking about church conflict. Those hard conversations that arise, those things that make people think, can I really do this? Can I really do this with these people? Can't we just kind of get along and sweep whatever is rising up under the rug, just put it aside so that we can be a community that is not having any tension or any stress or any conflict or any argument, so that we can just be, a church. And they start with this quote: "Too many churches think, wrongly, that they can be protected from division by avoiding conflict or by working only with people whom they can uniformly agree with ideologically. Avoiding conflict often ends up looking like one generation leaving behind difficult and increasingly complex issues for the next generation to inherit. Such avoidance may work in the short term, but fissures and tension points will inevitably emerge, paralleling any surfacing polarities in our culture. When churches avoid conflict, when churches try to put all of the tensions and stresses that exist in the world outside of the church and leave them there, when churches look at their own struggles and say, let's not talk about this because it is nicer not to talk about it, when churches treat everything like the Thanksgiving dinner with relatives, where you have a list of topics you don't discuss because you don't want cranberry sauce thrown, what we end up doing is teaching people that conflict is something to be avoided. We end up acting like the goal of life is to hang out with people who you don't have any conflict with, who you agree with completely on everything that exists, who you agree with completely on every religious issue or political issue or cultural issue, or who you have an agreement with that you just don't talk about those things. Stick to nice, polite conversation. Do not discuss religion or politics or culture or sexuality or anything else. And we help create a world where, when people run into conflict, when people run into tension, people leave to find that other place where there is no conflict, where there is no tension. Instead of having those deep conversations that could help resolve the tension, that could help us find compromise, that could help us find ways to come together to make the world a better place. I know that we've experienced some of this over the years. I know that before I came here, there was some tension around some stuff. And some folks took their toys and went home. Some found another church, some don't go anywhere. And because that happened before I ever got here, there's not a lot that I can do to address it. I also know that since I've been here, some people have heard something I have said and picked up their toys and gone home. And some of them go to church elsewhere, and some of them don't go to church anywhere. And whenever somebody has left in a huff, I have called them to say, "Why have you left?" And so I know the stories, and I know the things I have said and the things I have preached, and I stand by the things I have said and the things I have preached. But I want to be clear that I am open to disagreement. If you ever have a problem with something I say or something I preach, tell me. And let's sit down together and talk about it. Because I might learn from any of you just as much as you might learn from me. And I don't need to be the only one who gets to stand up here and talk about things. We can have big conversations. We can have deep conversations, and those are needed. I don't know if you have looked at the world recently. I don't know if you have looked at American culture recently. But I have, and something that I have noticed is that we have neatly divided into tribes. Each of these tribes has their own political parties. Each of these tribes has their own news sources. Each of these tribes has their own social media networks, their own churches, their own communities, their own consumption habits. It is a weird thing to think about, but different brands are coded for different groups. Whether you drink Coke or Pepsi can actually tell someone a lot about you. Whether you drink Coors or a craft beer can tell someone a lot about you. Whether you wear a baseball cap or a cowboy hat can tell someone a lot about you. It can feel like we are incredibly divided. Like there is an unbridgeable chasm between them and us, whoever they might be and whoever we might be. But it turns out that while there are some things that we really disagree on, there are a bunch of things that we, by which I mean Americans in general, actually agree on quite a bit. 87% of Americans support banning stock trading by the President, Vice President, and members of the Supreme Court. 86% support banning stock trading by members of Congress. I don't know why those numbers are different, but they are. 88% of Americans support having the ethical standards that apply to other federal judges apply to the Supreme Court. This is one of those things a lot of people don't realize, is that while there are ethical standards for judges, the Supreme Court just kind of carves themselves out. But 88% of Americans support having the same for everyone. Some that I found especially surprising: 89% of Americans support requiring police to use body cameras. 82% support making it a duty for police officers to intervene when they see a colleague using excessive force. And 81% support the creation of a national police misconduct registry, so that a police officer who does use excessive force can't just move a police department over. 80% of Americans support a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients, and 80% support increasing the number of visas available for skilled workers. Those numbers can feel surprising. Those numbers are a little surprising, and I don't know where everybody in this congregation stands on any of those issues. But I am shocked whenever I hear 80% or more agree on this thing. That doesn't mean everybody agrees on it, but that does mean a lot of people are on a similar page on a bunch of stuff, and those are just some of the things that 80% or more of Americans agree on. And it's even more if you lower that to 70%. Every one of those issues, every one of the issues in the surveys that I found is an issue that is presented to us as contentious, as full of conflict, as full of tension, as full of disagreement, as divided into one side and the other that are almost even and at war with each other about. And yet it turns out on a bunch of those things, a bunch of us are on the same page. Or at least similar pages, and I'm willing to bet that if we had some conversations, even if we left still disagreeing on a bunch of stuff, we would find even more things that we could agree on or compromise on or find a way to live together on. Our reading today is one of my favorites. If you've been coming for any length of time since I've been here, it's shown up a few times. Usually at least once a year there's this image, this vision that Isaiah has of this messianic banquet. This time when all of the nations will gather together on God's mountain, and God will provide a feast of rich food and well-aged wines. And take that shroud that is cast over all people, that power of sin and death and everything that makes life less, and destroy it. And then wipe away every tear. And I want to point out that the word all appears in that passage a whole bunch. God will make for all peoples a feast of rich food and well-aged wine. God will destroy the shroud that is cast over all peoples. And God will wipe away the tears from every face, from all faces. And we usually end this reading with the line, "For the hand of the Lord will rest on this mountain." Because the next line undercuts everything Isaiah just said. The next line is, the Moabites, who Israel has had a tense relationship with for a long time and for reasons, and who Isaiah has prophesied against, the Moabites shall be trodden down in their place as straw is trodden down in the manure. Isaiah is saying, here is God's wish for all peoples. Here is God's plan for all people. Here's what God is going to do for all people, except, of course, the Moabites. Because they're terrible. We don't like them. Isaiah, this prophet, this person who has been chosen by God to deliver a message to God's people. This person who was chosen by God by being drawn up into heaven and having a hot coal touched to his lips to purify them of sin. This person who has said, someone will be born to save the nations, to bring salvation to all of the people. Isaiah cannot imagine what all means. And I sympathize. I sympathize because I often have difficulty imagining what all means. I think most of us have difficulty imagining what all means. All means everyone, even them, even the folks we don't invite to Thanksgiving dinner because we know that inviting them will result in thrown cranberry sauce. But all means all. And if you're going to have all, some people are going to have to sit next to each other who don't agree on everything, who disagree on some things, who maybe even disagree vehemently on some things, and we're going to have to learn to live together. We're going to have to learn to talk together. We're going to have to learn to love each other in disagreement. And that's hard. I know that's hard. And I know it feels like it would be easier to just not talk about those things. To just leave the contentious issues aside. But I return back to what I said at the beginning. When we do that, we teach people not to talk about those things. We teach people not to engage in those conversations. We teach people that engaging in those conversations is bad and maybe even dangerous, and we shouldn't do it. And we let people go off to the folks who are engaging in those conversations, who too often are saying, agree with us or be evil. Agree with us or go to hell. Agree with us or not, or be outcast. We cede the world to greater division. But I believe that we can. By the power of the Holy Spirit, we can. With Christ on our side, we can have those conversations and create space where people can come together to have those conversations in love and in care for each other, where we can find common ground and work together, where we can find ways to compromise and let each other live our own truths without being hurt. And where we can find places where, well, some of us might have to be unhappy. But we can together find a way to live better. And I'm going to push this a little bit further, because I think the little bit further is so important. In a world that does not have enough of those spaces, enough of those conversations, those spaces and those conversations can be incredibly attractive. One of the church's deepest problems, one of the church's greatest struggles is that people don't think about the church. It does not enter their heads. They drive on by, they sleep in on Sunday morning. What does the stuff going on in that community matter to me? And when we don't talk about anything that matters to people, then people are justified in feeling that way. But if we can talk about, with love, with care, with community, if we can talk about all of those hard things that people are concerned about, that people are thinking about, that people are wondering about, that people are trying to figure out, how can I live in community with those people when they think this and I think this? If we can talk about those things, if we can talk about immigration, if we can talk about race, if we can talk about sexuality, if we can talk about how money is spent and what people need, we can talk about housing and education, not with an agenda, not with me standing up here and saying, here's what you should do, but with open hearts and open minds and open ears. We might just discover that there is far more that unites us, by which I mean the people in this congregation and the people in this community and the people in this state and this nation and this world, that there is much more that unites us, and much more that we can agree on or compromise on or find ways to work on together. There is much more of that than there are things that divide us. And we can say to those forces that try to divide us, those powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less, we are here doing God's work. We are destroying the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less. We are casting aside the shroud. We are wiping the tears away from the faces, so that all of us, even the Moabites, can gather together for this rich food and this well-aged wine here in God's community, in God's little consulate, in God's reign of love. We do that by creating space to do that. One of the authors of this book has done research on church conflict. And I think it's really research on hospitality. It's research that says welcome is not just about a sign on the door or a handshake when you walk into the sanctuary. It is about having that opportunity to be yourself and engage in conversation authentically. So he talks about this in terms of spaces. There's the yard space, where people feel represented and seen. The porch space, where people feel like they can express themselves openly and freely. The couch space, where people feel safe to experience vulnerability and accountability. And the table space, where people feel like they can exercise choice and affect how people in power make decisions. And what I am asking us to do, what I am suggesting might be important to do, what I am suggesting might be part of that congregationalist tradition that has been here for so long, what I am suggesting might be part of that Christian tradition that leads us to that messianic banquet, is create table spaces where we can all gather together in love, no matter who we are and no matter where we are on life's journey. Hospitality. Welcome, it turns out, isn't just about making space for everyone to be alone together, but making space for all of us to be in relationship with one another. And to that end, and I will end this sermon here, this fall I'm going to take a big swing. You've probably seen already that September 20th is our fall kickoff. It will also be the Sunday that we begin our fall sermon series that will carry us through to just before Advent. And importantly, will carry us through these apparently world-ending midterm elections. And I'm going to talk about politics. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'm not going to tell you where candidates stand. I'm not going to tell you what position to take on any issue. But I'm going to talk about how we can talk about politics, how we can think about politics, how we can engage not in these grand apocalyptic wars of politics, but in that core, that thing that is at the center of politics and is especially at the center of politics in a democracy or in a republic, how we live together. And I'm putting that out there now because I know that some of us are going to be a little nervous about it. That's one of those things you're not supposed to talk about in church. That's one of those things that's supposed to stay outside because it's contentious and can't we all get along? But not talking about it has not helped us get along. So let's try talking about it. And then seeing whether we can apply those same lessons to other things so that we can talk about more things and bring people together in conversation around a table with rich foods and well-aged wines in love. Because wouldn't that be an amazing world, filled to the brim with God's reign of love, where every tear could be every tear could be wiped away, and we could live together in peace and in harmony, even if not in sameness.